So a number of years ago, I had the privilege of joining Mike Leavitt as his chief of staff when he was governor, and kind of trailed along through doors that he opened up as the chief of staff at APA when he was the administrator there, and at Health and Human Services when he was the secretary. And we consistently had conversations about what we were witnessing in the way of collaboration. We conceptualized that the world was intuitively organizing itself into networks, and began to try to formulate what networks were succeeding and which were failing. And the consequence of our discussion was that we began to see three basic principles that began to drive this successful collaboration in a formal way. The first was that people were drawn together by a common pain or opportunity, most often a pain, a problem that was bigger than each company or individual could solve on their own, but big enough, but also sufficiently small that a group of people with goodwill and collaborative IQ could conceptualize a way to solve that problem by rolling up their sleeves and working hard together. But in addition to that, it required finding the right allies, finding the right convener, the right leader, and the right representatives to be at the table. If they in fact existed, there was a potential that whether it was a multidisciplinary group or a group of like-minded or industry sector people, then things in a positive way could move forward. And finally, we concluded that there had to be some formality that existed around it, that you had to build the right structure for collaboration to occur. And in that regard, collaboration for us meant that there had to be a formal written charter, that there had to be an open information source that every member of the collaboration had access to, and that in each of these that there would be a narrowly or at least carefully designed purpose, because collaborations have the ability to really expand their scope in ways that will that bring them to closure before they obtain their objective. And with that in mind, then, what we wanted to do today in this Solution Summit is begin the process of talking through a number of places where collaboration has been effective. Now, the first section is entitled Capital Collaboration. And I'd like to introduce to you the moderator of a unique panel of folks who are coming together, and that is Kurt Roberts. Now, Kurt is a Utah resident, and he is presently a partner at Kickstart, but his past is so diverse and interesting that he is worth grabbing in the hall to talk through. He's been the CEO of a healthcare system in the Northwest. He worked for 7 years at the highest levels of Nike. He has been involved in investments and startups and Fortune 100 companies consistently, and has a diversity of experience that allows him, I think, to lead this panel in a remarkable way. He'll be joined, and I'll invite Kurt and all of those who are going to participate on this panel to come out. And while he will introduce the panel members, let me just suggest that each of these pairs of four are a company and either the VC or equity firm that partnered with them to provide capital to allow them to either begin, commence, or to grow. And so, Kurt and panel, we'll turn it over to you with appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think panelists are coming out. I will either stay here at the podium or go join the panelists, depending upon how many seats we have over here. We'll see how we fill it out here. It's a real pleasure to be with you here today and celebrate specifically the topic of collaboration, how important collaboration is to an effective economy, to an effective relationship between government and the private sector. And it's a great opportunity today to be able to talk about that from one particular perspective, which is kind of collaboration between capital providers, which I'm a part of, and then the private sector, the companies that obtain that capital. So what I'm going to do is just go through a brief introduction of the people you see here in the chairs that represent a combination of capital providers that are partnering with specific companies and senior executives from those companies. I'll ask them to kind of raise their hands as I introduce them. We'll try to be relatively brief in this part, but you've got some incredibly impressive people here and I think you're going to benefit a lot from their perspectives. First person introduced is Harold Hockhauser. Harold, can you raise your hand? So Harold is the CFO of and COO of Ancestry. I think anybody who's been in Utah for very long and probably around the country knows who Ancestry is. This is one of Utah's great success stories from the building of a corporation from the ground up. Ancestry's been through a number of chapters in terms of its growth. It's an incredibly successful company. And I have to say that we at Kickstart have significant regret that we weren't some of the first investors in Ancestry. We missed a big opportunity. Next is Gordon Goldstein with Goldman Sachs, or excuse me, with Silver Lake Partners. Sorry, not Goldman Sachs. Silver Lake is a big fund, tech-focused fund with $39 billion in assets under management. Silver Lake is a company that most of you probably haven't heard of, but you've heard of many of the companies that they've invested in. I assume you've heard of Tesla, assume you've heard of Alibaba Group, GoDaddy, and Ancestry, okay, among many others. And so we'll have an opportunity to hear from Gordon today as we talk about that relationship. Steve Mills, there's Steve. Steve is the CEO of Uinta Brewing Company. Uinta Brewing Company is another great Utah success story. Steve joined the company as Chief Executive Officer in 2015. It's the 38th largest craft brewery in the U.S. Does that sound right? Those numbers still current? So very, very successful local company that contributes a lot to the local economy. And Tim Spring with the Riverside Company. Tim, just raise your hand real quick.
Number one brewery in Utah.
Yeah. Utah's doesn't have a lot of huge breweries, though. So Tim is with the Riverside Company. Riverside Company invested in 2014 in Uinta Brewery, $5 billion in assets under management in a private equity firm. Next is Tom Davin. Tom is CEO of 511 Tactical now. As it turns out, Tom and I have a lot of friends in common because Tom used to also be a part of Oakley, the sunglass company, at a time when I was running the sunglass and optical business at Nike. So we were competitors, but we also knew a lot of people in common. 511 is an Irvine, California-based provider of uniforms, tactical equipment for military, law enforcement, and public responders, first responders, and public safety. They also have a really nice consumer business. So this is a company you ought to check out if you want really great gear and clothing. Next is Pat Macchiarillo. Did I pronounce that right, Pat?
Close enough.
Pat is with Compass Group. Compass Group is a middle market private equity firm. And we'll have the opportunity to hear from Pat and talk about Compass Group's relationship with 511 Tactical. Next is Deborah Weiss. Deborah is SVP Retail Operations and Managed Care Processing at National Vision Incorporated. This is a holding company. Again, you may not have heard of National Vision, but you've heard of some of their brands. You've probably heard of America's Best Contacts and Eyeglasses. You've probably heard of Vision Center at Walmart. Among other businesses are businesses that Deborah's company runs. And finally, last is Travis Garvin.
Morning.
Travis is Director of Public Affairs at KKR. And if you haven't heard of KKR, I think the best word we could use to describe KKR is something that President Trump uses often, which is huge, right? KKR has $146 billion in assets under management, 108 portfolio companies. KKR has been at this business for a long time, has put a lot of capital into some of the most successful companies in the U.S. So it's great to have Travis here. Quick introduction of Kickstart Seed Fund, which is the fund that I'm a part of. We are a Utah-based fund. We're the largest seed stage venture capital fund in the state of Utah, and one of the largest in the Intermountain West. About 80% of our investments go into companies in Utah, and that, as it turns out, has been a very rewarding place to invest because Utah has one of the most vibrant tech ecosystems in the country. We hear from partners from the best, largest, most successful venture funds around the country that this is one of the markets they routinely pay attention to. And so Utah has clearly hit the map from a tech ecosystem standpoint. And most of our investments do go into tech. As it turns out, Utah produces a lot of software companies, and so software becomes a pretty significant focus for a fund like ours. So we kind of have, in some respects, we have the capital spectrum bookended here today. Because most of the time, our money at Kickstart is the first money that goes into a company after the founders have exhausted the patience of their parents and their own credit cards and their own bank accounts, and they're looking for outside capital for the first time. So we're going in when the company, to some extent, can still be mostly a dream, maybe with a product and some very early customers. Whereas most of the capital providers here today are at the private equity stage or at the later stage, growth stage. And so we've kind of got the capital spectrum bookended here, which I think is useful because you're going to hear the perspective of the early stage as well as the later stage and growth stage. So with those as introductions, I'd like to start to maybe pose some questions to the panel. First, a question to the capital providers. How do your firms select businesses to invest in? And specifically, what stood out for you about the companies that are sitting here on stage today that you chose to partner with? Any one of you want to take that? And let's get multiple perspectives on this question.
Thank you, Lito.
Sure. Good morning. So, again, Travers Garvin with KKR. In terms of the broad spectrum, we take sort of a top-down, bottoms-up approach. So we have a macroeconomic team that's tasked with, analyzing trends, forming core theses, big strategic ideas. Then we have a variety of individual industry teams, essentially, healthcare, industrials, tech, retail. And so at a broad level, that's the approach we take. We set some big themes, things we want to avoid, things we want to look at, and then the individual deal teams are tasked with meeting individual companies, meeting individual CEOs. I think in terms of national vision, we were struck by two things. One is that even though it had previous private equity ownership, we saw a tremendous potential for growth and continued growth. This was not a company that was doing badly. This was a company that was doing great, and we just wanted to take them further. The other thing we saw, I think, was tremendous leadership. Both Deborah and her team, one of our founders is a gentleman named George Roberts, and he has a saying which is, people like to do business with people they like and trust. And we had that like and trust factor right away with the team at National Vision. They have an incredible dedication to the healthcare component of Vision Care. And so those are a few of the things that we saw in this investment.
Yeah, cool. Other thoughts from capital providers here? Yeah.
Sure. So for us and with 511, we look for really two things before we decide if we're going to spend a lot of time understanding if the asset is a fit for us. The first is the product and what is it that they sell, and is it really valued by consumers. I'm a customer of 511. I had been a customer of 511. I know that the product is great and that the consumers who use it love it. And for me, that means a lot. We look for companies where if they went away, would their customers be really upset, or would it just be no big deal, right? And 511 is a perfect example of that, where I believe if it went away, there'd be a lot of really upset customers. Second thing we look for is great management teams. And it's our goal to back great management teams, not create great management teams. It's a lot safer. And we found that in 511, they had a great sort of fully built out, well-functioning management team. And the third thing I'd say is similar to Travers here, where can we put more money behind a team to really accelerate growth? 511 starting a new retail build out. We have one here in Salt Lake City. And it was the stores are just phenomenal and really resonating with consumers. And so that's an area where we could, put more capital in and accelerate growth. And so those are kind of the things we look for.
Great.
Yeah, just from the other side of that trade.
Yeah.
And for context, Ancestry, we did our first deal with private equity in 2007, with Spectrum, went public in 2009, went private in 2012 with a company called Primera, and then in 2016 partnered with Silver Lake. So we have had 3 sponsors. And in this last one, we were looking for a partner that would back us and really invest in the growth of the business and understand technology. And so Silver Lake, having gone through this a few times now, really stood out as wanting to get behind us, hire engineers, build out Utah, build out our San Francisco office, and invest in the growth of our business.
Yeah, if I can just reinforce Howard's comments. Silver Lake, in contrast to my colleague Travers at KKR, who works at an enormous platform for generalist investing where they do multiple industries. Silver Lake is a specialist investor. We invest in the technology industry and businesses that we characterize as being tech-enabled, that rely upon technology for a source of competitive differentiation. And when we looked at Ancestry as a prospective investment, we were attracted by two very powerful dynamics to the company. One was it provided an opportunity, as Howard mentioned, to invest for growth, and we're always looking for opportunities to invest for growth to make money for our investors. And secondly, we look for companies that have achieved some degree of competitive differentiation or have some sort of competitive advantage. And in Ancestry's case, their leadership in the family history and genealogy space is unsurpassed by any other player. They have, I learned yesterday, have aggregated more than 10 billion discrete documents, images, and records that describe our collective genealogy and history. No other firm has aggregated that tremendous database. And with their new DNA business, which has been growing 100% year over year, they have a tremendous new product that people are really excited about and which we think can allow the company to grow nationally and globally.
That's fantastic. I think I hope you're noticing a theme that's coming up here. And I want to comment on that theme just a little bit. Sometimes entrepreneurs or company operators, CEOs, when they seek capital, will seek kind of the best check they can get, giving up the least control, least amount of autonomy, least degree of value in their company. And our perspective is, and I think it would be the perspective of the sophisticated founders as well as the investors you're seeing here today, is that that's a really dumb approach to acquiring capital. There's a big difference between smart money and dumb money. And smart money is accompanied by the talent and people that have expertise to add to the business and really want to commit to the company and the management team and to making that business great. And so money's not money, it's not money, right? It's really, really important that you choose your partner well, and that fits in very, very well to the theme of collaboration that we're talking about here today. So we heard from the Ancestry perspective a little bit from the company side of the equation. Now let's flip the coin to the other folks that are on the company side here. Talk about why you chose the equity partner that you did, what you expect out of that equity partner, and how would you characterize that relationship and what the collaboration is like that you're experiencing in working together?
All right, I guess ladies first. So for us, well, we were a smaller private equity before KKR. KKR came in and partnered with our management group and really collaborated with us on what we were going to be able to do together. And it spurred us as leaders to be able to know that we were going to be able to develop and grow our company even more. So they came in and said, instead of opening 40 stores a year, which we were the fastest growing optical company already, they came and said, let's double that. Let's go 80. So that growth and the growth that we're able to do in Utah, we opened Orem just earlier this year, and we'll be opening 8 more stores in the next 2 years, and our lab is here. One of our manufacturing labs is here as well, so that collaboration is wonderful. They also, we get to collaborate with their other private equity people that they, not private equity.
Our other portfolio companies.
Yeah, the other portfolio companies. So I get to meet with other CFOs and other people that we collaborate cross-functional, so in their, not just in retail, so that we learn a lot from each other doing that as well.
Just to clarify, we bring in periodically groups of, so we'll bring in all the general counsels for our portfolio companies, or we'll bring in all the purchasing officers for our portfolio companies, or all the HR folks. And it's just an opportunity for cross-collaboration, different learning. So it helps sort of force magnify the lessons learned from different parts of our portfolio.
So I'm Steve Mills. I'm the CEO at Uinta, and I was not the founder. And actually, I came in after the transaction in August of 2014. But I can't speak for the founder. He readily admits that he's an entrepreneur. He's not an operator. And Uinta got so much bigger than he ever thought it was going to be. And he was humble enough and smart enough to recognize that and to seek outside expertise. And so, you know, he thought picking, particularly Riverside, to your point, to echo something that you said earlier, there was good chemistry there, and there were good values that they shared. And, you know, I would say at Uinta, people are really smart and they're nice and they work hard. And Riverside is very much the same way. So that was a good fit because, you know, we all roll up our sleeves and we all pull together.
Yep. Other thoughts on this?
Yes, Tom Davin, CEO of 511 Tactical. So Pat and the Compass Group have been great partners for the last year. We went through a process a year ago. It cost me about 20 nights of long dinners with prospective partners, but it yielded a very successful outcome. And I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs about capital structure, and what I always say to them is that the structure of your capital, the structure of your management team, structure always has to follow strategy. So we had to have the responsibility of outlining our strategy clearly to prospective capital partners, but the great thing about Compass is they have a longer-term view. Our pitch was we are transforming 511 from what is today or a year ago the leading global provider of tactical uniforms to police, fire, and the military, more than 4 million advocates in those various groups within the U.S., into a broad performance apparel brand that involves retail stores. My prior capital partners said retail is scary. There's so many ways it can go wrong. It's real estate, it's people, it's long-term leases. We don't want to do that. So that triggered the process that led to the sale of the company. And Pat and his team not only had a high level of trust for us, we trusted them, but we said, we get it. And we don't have a timeline for the next event for 511, whether it's an IPO or the sale of the company. Let's get behind the strategy. Let's fine-tune it. We're going to ask you a lot of questions about it, but let's get the right resources to roll out the stores, and let's go. So they've been great so far. And Pat looks good in the pants.
I just want to echo something Travis said that I think is just one additional element of this idea of collaboration that can help support building companies. We have the advantage, KKR has the advantage of scale, we have the advantage of geographic concentration. And we can use that to our advantage to do some of the same things that you heard from Travis. We, for example, get all of our chief marketing officers together once a month. And they just share learning experiences and talk about what tools they're using and how much they're paying for those tools, giving each other advice as to how they can get better contracts and what to use for different kinds of things when they do marketing. We do the same thing for the CTOs, the CFOs. CEOs get together 3 times a year. You know, so this is just one of those opportunities. The collaboration doesn't just need to exist between the capital provider and the company, but you can also facilitate it company to company. And I think that makes a big difference.
No, just to touch on that a little bit, we operate kind of more at the middle market and not in as large of deals as these gentlemen. And, you know, for companies our size, it's not just formal, but it's informal collaboration. We have board meetings once every quarter where everybody comes in. We have a ton of dinners around it, you know, have a good glass of wine, talk about what's going on in your business, what's going on in yours. That informal collaboration tends to lead to a lot of opportunities later on. And that's just another aspect of it.
Yep. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit, talk about national policy. Tax reform, major topic of conversation at the federal level now. From your perspective as both company operators as well as investors, what do you want to see prioritized as it relates to tax reform? What's most important to you?
I would actually, my answer would be immigration reform. In that our bottleneck is hiring skilled workers, right? And so it's not just reforming, it's also, let me back up. We had an intern class this year, 60 or 70 people, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, BYU, and you know they looked like a cross-section of the globe. And so we need to keep those people here and that IP here. And so that, for us, would be probably ahead of tax reform.
Immigration reform would be number one. Other thoughts?
A couple things. I think simplification would help. I mean, a lot of the small businesses, again, we talk about size, small and medium-sized businesses end up paying an effective tax rate that's much higher than larger businesses because they don't have the offshore accounts, you know, or they don't have their IP in Ireland, or they don't have, you know, an army of tax lawyers kind of on staff. So simplification and kind of a leveling of the playing field, I think, would be good. I also am not a fan of removing the interest deduction. I think that, you know, that's going to hurt a lot of people. I think there's a, you know, pension funds, 401ks, value of a lot of assets would go down, and it would have kind of far-reaching implications.
Okay.
I can jump on that since you've raised the subject of interest deductibility. There is a proposal that has been circulated to eliminate the deductibility of interest for borrowing. And For small businesses and medium businesses, this change in tax law, which has been established tax law for more than 100 years, would affect about 75% of startups, 80% of medium-sized businesses, and really change the structure by which businesses operate. For 100 years, it has been a principle that you tax businesses on their profits, not on their costs, and this would change it fundamentally and would have a highly disruptive effect to the growth of jobs and growth of businesses.
Okay.
So I jump in on that. I would agree. First of all, look, I think we very much support the idea of tax reform. On this narrow issue of interest deductibility, I might layer in with just an anecdote about our experience with National Vision. So we've been invested with them for about the past 3 years. In that time, we have, or they have, truthfully, opened 198 new stores. Most of that new growth, that growth capital, is funded by short-term loans and corporate credit. If the deduction for net interest deduction is eliminated, I think it's very fair to say that the trajectory for those new openings, those new store openings, the new job growth is certainly not going to be on the same path. So I think it's something that bears watching and looking out for sort of unintended effects.
Yeah, just for us as an operator, we just put up a new headquarters in Lehigh, right by the point of the mountain. So it's a $50 million facility that, had we not been able to use leverage, right, our cost of capital would have been higher. If it was not deductible, our cost of capital is higher. And then you have to start debating whether or not that facility makes sense. If it elevates again your cost of capital, decisions just come under the entire bar gets raised, and it's harder to generate the same economic profit.
Yep. Yep.
And sometimes, small businesses, when you're up and running, you're in super heavy growth mode. Sometimes you have to borrow short term to operate. So, any time that it goes up, anytime the cost to borrow goes up, it's just a hindrance to our business.
Right. Right. Okay. So Harold mentioned, in addition to tax policy, and I think we've heard some good thoughts on that. Harold also mentioned immigration policy. Are there other things that others of you would feel are kind of high on the list of what you'd like to see tackled in Washington?
Can I just touch on a local company, actually, that I think makes a lot of sense? And that is, we talk about tariffs and we talk about steel tariffs. We own a company out in Payson, Utah, Liberty Safe, leading provider of gun safes in the U.S., 330 employees, great business as far as U.S. manufacturing. When a tariff on imported steel goes on, right, all of a sudden, day one, the steel producers increase their prices. That's about 60% of our input costs. So, and we're competing with Chinese safe manufacturers, who that doesn't happen to, right? And so all of a sudden, we're at a massive competitive disadvantage. So I would just ask that, Washington look at some of these things that look good on paper, these protectionist ideas, just reverberate throughout the economy and can end up costing a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
If we're looking at policy broadly, I'll throw in a quick plug for a continued focus on infrastructure. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is this doesn't always have to be just federal dollars or just state dollars. In this theme of collaboration, there are a lot of funds that have significant private capital dedicated towards infrastructure upgrades. We have one of them. Several other private equity firms have this. So, there is a way to make it where it's a win-win between private capital, public capital, and keeping development going in this country.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I'll just pick on what I think is a dead letter at this point, the border adjustability or border adjustment tax of taxing imported products where you can no longer deduct as a cost of doing business anything you import. 511 Tactical already spends $1 million a month on tariffs and duties on imported apparel and things like backpacks. Some of those rates go as high as 33%. So you can rest assured that any clothing or backpacks or nylon gear you buy in the U.S. today is generally among the most highly taxed items already. So anything that looks like a border adjustment tax on imported items is going to lead to a big increase in consumer product prices on those different products.
Okay. Yeah.
For those of you who are beer drinkers out there, about 50% of the cost of beer by the time it reaches your hand is in taxes. And a lot of us, there are about 7,000 breweries in the United States, and many of them, most of them are much smaller than Uinta Brewing Company. So, and we put they're very capital-intensive businesses, and we put about 9.9 cents of every single dime back into our companies. And so any tax relief that we would get would go right back into our businesses. We would add more jobs. We would continue to expand our businesses. So if you're looking for job creation, it's a good bet.
Yeah. Okay. Let's switch gears and kind of center things. We've talked about things at the national and federal level. Let's talk about Utah now for a minute. Some of you do business almost exclusively or exclusively in Utah. Others of you, Utah is maybe perhaps a small piece of your operation, and from the investor's perspective, maybe a little bit in Utah, but a lot elsewhere. Talk about what you see about Utah that makes this an attractive place to do business and grow and expand and invest here. Are there things that are unique to this place that you think make this a great place to do business?
I think I'll probably pep up here. And this is sincere. I think the people of Utah are really good people. There's a good vibe. There's a good culture. We're in craft beer business. There's no better place to create a company where people can really thrive behind sort of a vision that Mills has created. So I think if you came to our brewery, you'd see that. And I don't think it's just because we're a brewery. It's I'm from out of state. And I see it all the time. There's a healthy outdoor mindset and a collaboration that's built into the culture of Utah.
Yeah.
And I think it really has helped Uinta.
That's cool. Others? Yeah.
Well, if you like to work hard and play hard, I don't think there's a better state in the union. You know, we take it very seriously, both of those things very seriously.
Good.
Yeah, I'll definitely build on the play hard part. But it is, and I'm from New York, I've been here 10 years, and it's a phenomenal place to do business. You have a great workforce, people love it here, great universities, BYU, the U, phenomenal schools, and a government that sort of gets out of your way. So you're really just, you could go about your daily routine, building your business without any real intervention, and I say that constructively. And that's why Goldman's here, lots of large companies are headquartered or excuse me, at least have their largest presence here.
Yeah. Other thoughts on Utah?
We love it. I mean, we invest in here. We've looked at, 511's growing here. We have one portfolio company here that I mentioned, Liberty Safe. It's a great place to, there's great talent. We've looked at 2 or 3 other companies very closely and purchased, and it's all these things that are said here, the low regulatory burden, an educated population who works hard. I mean, that's all you can ask for.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll back the same thing. That's why we chose Salt Lake for one of our manufacturing labs. So we ship out of Utah to all our stores across the country every week, 35,000 pairs of glasses, which is, you think, wow, okay. So, and when we're at capacity here in Utah, we'll be shipping close to 65,000. So the workforce here is very, very good, and the incentives for us to come here. We built our lab here 3 years ago, and so we just plan on growing and growing.
Yeah, so I'll just offer the perspective of being an investor in Utah and also having grown up here, moved away, lived away for 21 years, and then come back. Some things that I think make Utah unique. First, from sort of a company building perspective, and I think you'd hear the same thing, just some additional insights into what you've heard shared. Utah companies tend to be built like the founders, even if they're investing somebody else's money, they treat it like their own. People don't throw money at problems here, right? We tend to be scrappy. We tend to be creative. We tend to solve problems. We tend to pay a lot of attention to fundamentals. Businesses here are being operated for the long term. It's not just take large sums of money and just grow like crazy and spend like crazy and hope it all works out in the end. This is an environment where fundamentals matter. And I think that from an investor's perspective, we love that. Second thing is the talent. I mean, Utah grows great people. And there increasingly are people coming from outside of the state of Utah that want to be here because it's such a great place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. Healthy, super healthy quality of life. A lot of diversity of things to do in your free time. There's just a lot of talent here. And a government that gets things done. State government in Utah, I think, really fundamentally works. And there's a reason why every year when these national rankings come out as to the best states to do business, that Utah's at the top of the list and has been for years, right? It's because we get things done here. And the collaboration between the public and the private sector, between capital providers and companies, I think works really well. And I think you heard some of that here.
Yeah, I'll just add to that with a quick story. We were over at our 511 retail store last night, which is by the big Costco on 1800 South. We're about to wrap up the visit at 6:30, and I look over and there's a woman behind the counter who I had not seen. It turns out she had just come into work. It's a pretty tough-looking woman in that she had a fully tattooed set of sleeves. She was wearing one of our workout 511 tops. I was like, wow, that woman's got something going on. So I went over and introduced myself, and I said, do you work here full-time? No, I love the product. I'm a full-time assistant at the local FBI field office. I work in cyber terrorism. Here's a place you ought to go for dinner. I mean, she had the whole program going. She could talk about any product in the lineup. I thought that's a great example of a Utah person. Positive attitude, a little bit of swagger, but humility as well, and she knew her stuff.
That's great. Thank you. One last question, then we'll open it up to the audience to ask questions of any one of the panelists. Last question. How can government do a better job, from your perspective, at supporting and enabling, fostering collaboration between businesses and investors for all the great outcome trying to achieve, job creation, growth, all those things? What can government do better?
I'll jump in with one obvious but nonetheless important argument. When we think about changes in government policy, the principle of first do no harm should guide those deliberations and those discussions. And I think one of the reasons why the debate about tax reform has become so divisive and so controversial is because some of the principles involved in the House Ways and Means blueprint that's been debated over the past 6 months would be extraordinarily disruptive to the way business is conducted today and the way business has been conducted for well over 100 years with respect to key elements of the tax code. So when whole industries have defined themselves on the basis of the regularity and the transparency and predictability of certain tax structures, it's very important not to disrupt them overnight and throw those businesses into disarray.
You know, I would argue, I know something that's near and dear to Senator Lee's heart, removing regulations. I mean, the more time that we have to spend thinking about Sarbanes-Oxley or, you know, various overburdensome regulatory matters, the less time Tom can spend and the less time that I can spend working with him and trying to help him, you know, create more jobs, open more stores, collaborate more together is all I would say. So I would keep an eye on that.
Any other thoughts on this one? Yeah.
I like Gordon's first principle. The second principle might be that it's not us versus them. So I've already mentioned it a bit, but you know, take infrastructure, for example, and the idea of P3s, public-private partnerships. Private capital wants to be aligned, wants to collaborate with public projects, public good, things that advance society as a whole. So I think sometimes there's this dynamic of, well, if investors or private capital is interested, there must be something off. You know, there can be a lot of alignment and things can be structured in a way that puts people on level footing. Okay,
let's open them to the audience. I think we have microphones out in the audience, so raise your hand and I think we can bring a mic to you. And yeah, up here in the front.
A pretty large voice, I think. We can hear you. You guys talk about the industries that you're involved in, and congratulations on your successes. But there's another element to the family that's involved here. And as someone up here mentioned, the universities, right now there are a number of very invasive, very destructive technologies out there. They're going to change our lives. Unfortunately, the private sector of the state of Utah treats that element of our advancement with, that's good, we'll put that off over there and we'll give that another spot. We are all about IT when it comes to, I'm in the market in 6 months and I can make a killing. But our universities, which are phenomenal, receive some of the worst funding in the country. And yet we have phenomenal scientists. Senator Lee has made great inroads in helping us. But I challenge each of you, look at the destructive sciences that are coming up. New energy, new water, Municipal waste is something all of us take for granted. Nobody pays attention. We know that the garbage truck comes out, picks up our can, and moves on. But do you know there's technologies out there that can change the way it poisons our water, it poisons our environments, yet still the private industry of this state takes a back seat to what's happening there. We talked about regulation. I agree with you 100%. Regulation is stifling us, but it also stifles technologies. When we talked about new IT, let's be specific. Is it a new app for the phone? Ancestry, phenomenal business. That's great for my grandmother. But I've got a 4-year-old I got to worry about and whether or not he's going to breathe in 20 years. Energy is more of an effect than you know. Our nuclear fleet right now is about to go right through the floor. We are losing, on average, 5 nuclear plants a month. Do you know we have nothing to replace them? What I encourage you to do and what I ask is in your infrastructure, when you talk to your CEOs and you talk to the rest of your management team, are you guys taking the opportunity to look at what's out there, what can change? Because let me tell you something. On energy alone, one new type of nuclear fuel system is worth trillions. It will change everything you do and will take the average household from paying between 8 and 12 cents a watt to as little as a penny a watt. There's a lot of really cool things there. Please, I encourage you, look at the universities. Talk to the universities. I am with a political consulting group, and I'm hoping to approach each of you. But I ask this question. Are you guys looking at other things other than, well, it's great for the phone. I got something at the store here, and I'm going to open 9 new stores. What are we doing for our kids? So I put that question on you as a panel, because you are the ones we turn to. We're looking to you for leadership. So I put to you.
Okay.
Are you guys looking at that?
Thoughts from the panel?
Could you repeat the question?
I'll jump in. One thing I'm really proud about Uinta is, and I hear what you're saying about some members of industry and some businesses, but I think it's a little unfair to lump us all into that bucket that you mentioned. Uinta was the first wind-powered business in all of Utah and the second brewery in the United States to be wind-powered since we've added solar. When we can become a zero landfill brewery in Utah, because the infrastructure is there, we'll be first in line for that. And we know there's an organic digester, that there's a business up and coming, and hopefully by the end of 2018 it'll be there. And I'm really excited about that. Yeah, right? It's really cool. And then water's really important here for us throughout the entire state. So breweries are water intensive and we're energy intensive. We talk about it every day, how we can save water and how we can treat our water to make sure that the water that we are discharging is good for Utah. So, and I think we're not the only ones. There are groups of us here in Utah that pay attention to that, and we talk to each other, we learn from each other, and we do our very best to be good neighbors.
Let me just add to that quick. One thing I don't think we do well enough, and maybe that is an area maybe the government can help, is the facilitation between universities and private sector. I was teasing you a little bit, but those young minds have very passionate views about how business should operate in the new millennium. And I don't think we do enough of it. I know we don't. So any help to the audience or to the government that can facilitate that, because it's always an awkward collaboration, right? We're moving pretty fast. There's a lot of money on the table, and they're young kids and they're coming up. But the ability to make that pairing would be very, very helpful. Thank you.
I just say real quickly, I mean, there's a lot of issues there. KKR is taking great pains. We put this under the bucket of ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues. We have a dedicated team, full-time staff. We put out a report on these issues. So we are trying to address a lot of those in a way that is not that is not greenwashing, that's not some glossy report, but that each company will figure out what is material to their company. Maybe it's water use, maybe it's energy, maybe it's education or something else, and figuring out what is the best way to address those issues as part of our investment thesis. So I would just, it's kkresg.com, I believe, is where we publish all our work on that. So just know that there are people that are spending a lot of time on this.
I'll just make one quick comment on that, too. I worked for 7 years in higher education, specifically in the field of taking inventions that professors had created through their research and putting them into the private sector. And I think being in that world for a while taught me a lot about the resources that are available, both at the federal level and at the state level, to help make that happen. And I think there's more there than meets the eye. I originally thought when I went into that world that it would be largely up to us to figure out how we could rally private capital and get talent management teams to take some of these ideas and put them into companies. And became aware of actually a lot of federal programs, SBIR, STTR program, that provide non-dilutive capital to startup companies that are trying to bring those kinds of ideas to market, as well as the USTAR program, things out of the GOED office here in Utah that make a big difference in that regard. So there's more there than meets the eye, I think. Other questions? Yes, right here in red. Go ahead and stand up. Sorry, let's get the mic.
I'm Tamara Angeloff, and I'm the local taxpayer advocate for the state of Utah. So I work with the IRS and ensure that taxpayers are treated fairly. And I did a lot of work on the affordable tax, also known as Obamacare. And I don't want, and so don't shoot me, but I'd like to know how that's impacted your businesses, because I know there's a lot of reporting, and it's, you know, there's just a lot of stuff that's gone into that, and I really would, I'd love to have it reformed, because I don't think that everything was considered, and it's harmed a lot of taxpayers. And so if it has harmed your businesses or made it better, I'd like you to report out that to Senator Lee, and so that he can help, because he is on that board. And I know that my office, we have to follow the Internal Revenue Code, but it really needs to be.
Okay. Thoughts from the panel on that?
Actually, could you just repeat the question? Yeah. Tighten the question. I couldn't hear it.
Yeah. Your voice was a little challenging to hear. Maybe just sort of the narrow aspect of, you're talking about something related to tax policy, how it's affecting businesses.
Right. The affordable tax, the Obamacare.
How is
Affordable Care
Obamacare
Act?
affected?
Right. The Affordable Care Act, and all of the implications that it put on the businesses and everyone. And so I just would like to hear about maybe some of the impact on that.
Yeah, thoughts on the ACA?
Yeah, I can speak for Ancestry, but I'll turn to Gordon for the rest of the portfolio. It really has not been a burden for us. So I don't want to get into the politics of the ACA, but for us, speaking for Ancestry only, it has not been a burden.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
There are additional reporting requirements, so there's more work for my HR team. Maybe indirectly, it's increased cost of health care, our part that we pay, and the employees, the part they pay. One of the things we've done that I just offer up is, I think something that's been helpful, is we show every employee exactly what we pay in their part of the health care cost plus what they pay. And a lot of people didn't realize that we were paying 2/3 and they were paying 1/3. They only focused on the 1/3 they were paying and how much that was going up. Not that they're happy when they see it's a lot more than just their 1/3, but they at least understand the bigger picture.
Yeah. Any other comments on this one? Okay. I think we've got just a little bit of time left. Time for one more question. Have to be kind of a quick one. Yeah, go ahead. In the suit coat there.
Continuing the ever-popular tax theme, you talked about not doing away with the interest deduction, but it seems to me that something that would make sense is to provide a dividends paid deduction for the corporation, so that you could structure your equity between debt and equity in a way that made sense for business purposes rather than for tax purposes. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that, or if there's any hope for that.
Just, you're saying you'd get a tax deduction for a dividend just like you do on interest?
Exactly.
Got it.
So there's tax equivalence between debt and equity.
If you pay it out to your shareholders, you get a deduction on it just the same, so it's only...
Right.
I've not heard debate about that
I
before,
mean,
so I'm curious what you think.
The implications for that, obviously it would be great as a business, you'd have fewer taxes. I would say, part of what's good about a business is retained earnings. Sometimes, Tom wants to keep some of the money and not dividend it out so that Tom can build a new, facility. And I don't know, there's a lot of nuances in what you're saying, and I don't know how it would play out in that, but there's kind of pros and cons, I guess.
Yeah. I'd say most of these companies aren't dividend payers as well. Perhaps none of you are dividend payers. So this is much more of an issue, I would guess, for public companies, larger public companies that pay dividends on their stock. But anyway, we are out of time. I want to give a big thank you to Senator Lee and Senator Lee's staff for bringing such an amazing panel together. Please join me in thanking our panelists for sharing their insights here today.